Regulation is going to be a big theme in this training, and one of the things you should understand up front is that every player, no matter if they are a complete beginner or the best in the world, have some sort of strategy for concealment at the table. Some players have a conscious, actual process they use to conceal behavior, and others have a less conscious, intuitive strategy. The important thing to note is that we can learn to reverse engineer what that concealment actually means if we understand the four gaps in a player's regulation. I'm going to go over each real quick and show you an example. First is when a player regulates certain behaviors but not others. For example, they might keep their face very stoic in certain moments but not regulate their hands at all. When a player regulates certain movements and not others, they are often very exploitable because they are incorrectly thinking that they aren't giving off any information. These players also tend to be a thinking and somewhat serious poker player with a developed thought process, which makes identifying behaviors even more valuable because you can see inside and reliably predict that process. Let's take a look at an example. Okay, so this player right here will dedicate a significant amount of effort towards what I call upward concealment. His posture is upright, he has a good level of facial control, and he is going to always place his arm over his chest after acting. Now, his concealment strategy for that isn't perfect. He is going to have differences in that as well. We can clearly see that there is variability in his placement. However, the real value is that this player doesn't regulate his hand movement and pre-flop routine. He will double check his cards, place a chip on his cards, and have massive leakage in his pre-flop behaviors. Also, this is a really good player with a high level thought process, and in later videos, I'll show you exactly how we can use behaviors to really rip him apart. For now, just understand that his gap in concealment is that he is regulating one part of his body and not another, making one area significantly easier to read. The second gap is when a player regulates at certain moments and not others. A common trend you will see is that the amount of effort a player dedicates towards regulation increases with pot size. This is one of the many reasons why it's so easy to build pre-flop reads, because players aren't dedicating a lot of effort towards regulating pre-flop. Let's take a look at an example. Okay, so first I want you to watch a clip of this player, then I'll break it down. So he starts off talkative, smiling, and friendly pre-flop, and after rechecking his cards, we really don't see that much of a difference. He doesn't attempt to conceal his behavior at all and almost seems to be even happier. A lot of players will actually confuse this with extreme strength. It's actually quite rare to see such a low level of regulation with hands on the top of a player's range, and this type of pre-flop behavior is generally more an indication of a marginal hand. Now that being said, I want you to watch what happens to this player's behavior after he bets on the flop. No fun, no games, he starts to get serious, and there's definitely a layer of regulation in his behavior. Now, he happens to have pocket sixes in this spot, and for this player, this is essentially a bluff. Also, I just want to call out that this spot is a pretty decent example of a fairly obvious bluff. Based on this player's pre-flop behavior, I highly doubt him to be on the top of his range, and think his pre-flop behavior is more likely to be an indication of a marginal hand. Based on the dramatic change in his behavior, This is one of those spots where he either has an extremely strong hand or is bluffing, and there are just way more hands that miss here. This is also an example of a spot where raising is quickly going to tell us which side of the equation we are on. His opponent makes it 105 and he ends up folding his pocket sixes. The important thing I want you to remember about this clip is that he is not regulating at all pre-flop and then regulates post-flop. Let's take a look at the next gap.